StrayAllDay.com.
You're now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to occur. And on top of all this, there is more. You to use those of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves all of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into one package, one framework, one philosophy, one mindset, one approach. We have a bunch of books on the subject. We're going to give you a bunch of frameworks. I shouldn't say one framework, a bunch of different frameworks. And you are listening to the daily masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is rule number one: break the rules. That's what we're talking about here today, breaking the rules and understanding the mindset that goes behind breaking the rules, why it makes sense to break the rules, and how breaking the rules can actually help you get ahead further and faster. Now, before I get into explain this one a little bit more, let me first tell you that I have a text message line where you can text me and you can share with me an insight or an idea or a question, a challenge that you got from anything you heard on this masterclass, or you can text me just because you want to get my daily motivation text, which I send out every single day to everyone who's in my texting community. My text number is 305-384-6894. If you want to receive my daily motivation text, just text me at that number again, 305-384-6894, and you can engage with me directly there by sharing questions, challenges, etc. Whenever it hits you, because I spend time every single day just going through my text messages, seeing what's going on in there and engaging with my audience directly. So this topic here, rule number one, breaking the rules. Now, we talked about rule breaking a couple times here on this show. Most recently was just a few weeks ago where we talked about the benefits of non-compliance and rule breaking, which was in episode number 1909, which was, it seemed like it wasn't too long ago, but it was actually about about 7 or 8 weeks ago when we talked about that. In episode number 1655, I told you about rules that I would give myself 20 years if I was going back 20 years ago. If I was going back 20 years, what would I tell my younger self? The question that I get asked sometimes by people that say, well, what would you tell a person, yourself a long time ago? So when it comes to breaking the rules, this is something that I think, especially over the last year or two plus, with all of us, being that we've had the COVID going on, and not even the virus itself, but all the things that came with it, like the mandates and the lockdowns, and people losing a lot of freedoms either been lost, given up, or stripped from people. And one of the things that I've heard people say, something that I've even said myself, and something that I still believe to be true, at least as of this recording, the only way that a lot of the mandates and changed rules and whatever other words you want to use, stripped freedoms or rights, depending on how you see it, that have been taken away, the only way they're going to come back is when people stop following the rules. When people say, you know what, I'm not going to follow that rule anymore, the rule goes away. When people say, well, I'm not going to adhere to that restriction anymore, the restriction goes away. When people are not following a rule, people will stop trying to enforce that rule. That rule will cease to be enforced. This is just kind of the way that it works. And the thing that people need to understand is that you cannot comply your way into getting what you want. Now, if you want to get what you want from people and they're not giving it to you right now, complying with everything that they're telling you to do is not the way to get there. You might think that's the way. You might think that's if you just go along to get along, that you'll eventually get what you want from another person, but usually it's the exact opposite. The more you allow someone to enforce rules upon you, the more you allow someone to take from you, this is going to keep taking from you. Why? Because the law of inertia. Two, because humans are humans, and as long as you keep giving, people are going to keep taking. This is just the way that it works. And if you want to get your way in life, sometimes you're going to have to go against the grain. Sometimes you're going to have to push back. And if you are unwilling to go against the grain and or push back, then you should get comfortable not having what you want, because this is just the laws of human nature. This is just the way that it works out. Now, again, you can defy this if you want. You can disagree with me if you wish. You can text me and tell me about it, or you can just keep going about allowing your you want to call them rights, you want to call them freedoms, you want to call them whatever abilities you had to continually be stripped from you because you think eventually they're going to be handed back to you. It does not work that way. I mean, you can find any situation in life where it has worked, that will be the first one. All right, it's not going to happen in our lives right now either. Eventually, people are going to have to just stop complying. That's the only way you're going to get things to go back or change. If you want something to change, eventually you have to decide, you know what, I'm not going to go along with how it's been. I want it to be different, and you're going to have to push. And if you're not willing to push and create friction and go against the grain, then the grain is going to go against you. And that's basically what it is. And this topic here today is not necessarily about anything that's happening today, like today, socially or anything like that. But this concept can be applied to that. It was something that I was thinking about when I came up with the notes for what we're going to talk about here today. But this is for anyone who's looking to make change, anyone who's looking for things to be different, any situation in your life when things are not going the way that you want it to go and you're looking to create some difference in what you have going on, then you have to be willing to break some rules. And if you're not willing to do that, then you just got to get comfortable with how things are, because they're not going to change, not on their own at least. Again, remembering the law of inertia, that an object or situation will remain as is, whether in motion or stagnant, until or unless acted upon by an outside force. So let's get into our points here today. The topic, once again, is rule number 1, break the rules. First thing, rules are made in order to maintain order and keep everyone doing things uniformly and predictably. That's the reason that rules exist. Keeps everything in order, keeps everybody doing the same things. It makes things predictable for us humans. We are creatures of habit. We want things to be predictable. We get anxious and we kind of get disturbed when things are not predictable and we don't know what's going to happen. So in this sense, rules are actually a good thing. All right? Rules are not necessarily bad. So if you have rules at your home, if you have rules in your business, if you have rules for yourself, that's not a bad thing. You're not doing anything wrong. And if you follow rules at home, at work, in your business, in your life, that is not a bad thing. It's actually a smart thing to do, to follow rules. However, to make a difference in life, if you want things to change, that's what making a difference means. It means doing something different. In order to make a difference, you must be unconventional and unpredictable, at least in some ways. You have to do something different in order to get something different. Everyone understands that, at least on a logical level. Things do not change when you follow rules. When you follow rules, what happens is you just get more of what already exists. That's what happens when you follow the rules. So if you're following rules right now and you don't like how things are, understand that if you continue to follow the rules, things will continue to stay exactly as they are. And when you think about just looking through your own life and your own experiences, whether on a micro level in small situations that only you and a few people know about, or macro situations that the whole world knows about, the only time things have changed in our lives, all of our lives, the only time things really become different is when someone or a group of someone's decides we're not going to follow these rules anymore. We're going to do things completely differently. And when they did it, they were able to make it work. That's when things changed. An example I'll give you, when I talked about the favorite podcast that I listened to, that was a 2-part series I did in episodes 1637 and 1638. And those will be linked down below in the show notes. One of the shows that I listened to is called Marketing Secrets and is by a guy by the name of Russell Brunson. He started a company called ClickFunnels. And I use ClickFunnels for a lot of my websites and sales funnels. If you ever bought one of my books or one of my courses, or even if you go to dreallday.com, at least some of the pages on dreallday.com are hosted on the ClickFunnels software. And Russell, being a marketing guru that he is, he talks about this himself. In your niche, you have to figure out which rules you can break in order to make yourself stand out. So one of the things that he says in order to find your space is, first of all, find an area where there is some activity happening, that you're talking about something that other people are talking about. Because if you come out talking about something that nobody's ever heard of, then maybe there's no opportunity there. Because if nobody's ever heard of it, then that means you have to educate the entire world, or at least your potential market, on that subject. And the time that you spend doing that, doing all the education, by the time people catch on and understand, maybe you've missed your opportunity. So you don't want to jump into an ocean where there's nobody there. You want to jump into an ocean where there are at least some fish already swimming in that ocean. Then you got to carve out your space within that ocean. The way that you do that is to look around at what you see everybody else saying, or what everybody else is doing or conforming to, what rules they're already following. Then break some of those rules, and that's how you're still in the space that people understand, so you don't have to educate them on what you're doing, but at the same time, you brand yourself. You carve out a little bit of space for yourself by being a little bit different from everybody else. So this is the exact strategy for doing it. So again, it's not doing something completely brand new that nobody gets, but it's doing something that people get, but doing it in a different way. Just a little bit rule-breaking, different type of way. So figuring out which rules you can break to make you stand out. So breaking a rule can be as simple as challenging a long-held belief in your space. Now, it doesn't have to be something so radical that it just scares people, but just challenging a long-held belief. I'll give you an example. Give you a couple examples. In basketball, it was traditionally known that you play the game from the inside out. So when you had a couple days ago, I mentioned Shaquille O'Neal. You had a guy like Shaquille O'Neal, or a big guy. These days you have Jokic, who plays for the Denver Nuggets, or Joel Embiid, who plays for the Philadelphia 76ers, or these really big guys who are 7 feet tall. You would play the game for a team. Everything would start with the big guy. You throw the ball inside to the big guy, let him have his way down there, whatever he could do. And if he happened to pass to the guy outside, the outside guys, the perimeter players, then they got to do their thing. The game was played inside out. The team was built around the big guy, and then it worked its way around to the perimeter guys. But over time, we started to have more talented guys on the perimeter, to the point that basketball teams stopped building their teams around the big guy, even stopped even having guys that big on the court for a team, and they started playing what we now call small ball or positionless basketball, where you have 5 players out there. None of them is really that big. None of them is close to Shaquille O'Neal's size, but the team is still successful. So you can be successful without even building from the inside out. One player who's been a big embodiment of this is Stephen Curry and his team, also the Golden State Warriors, so where they can have 5 players out on the court and be a very effective unit, even though they don't have a guy who's anywhere close to Shaquille O'Neal's size. And the offense is kind of based around guys who are shooting the 3-point shot from the outside, like a Stephen Curry or a Klay Thompson. They came along shooting all of these threes, and the traditionalists, when these guys first came around, before they became wildly successful, people look at that team and say, well, yeah, it's cool, they're shooting all those threes and it's fun and all that, but when it gets to the playoffs and the game gets slower and the defenses are stronger, that 3-point shot, you're not going to be able to win with just shooting 3-pointers. You got to take the ball inside. You got to get near the rim. They would say, the saying always was, if you live by the 3, you will die by the 3. Traditional basketball analysts and coaches and even players would say this all the way up through the 90s, when I first started watching basketball, all the way into this century. Now teams would say that until Steph Curry and the Warriors actually started dominating and winning championships, and their offense was based around the threat of the 3-point shot. It's not that they didn't shoot shots inside the 3-point line, but the threat of that 3-point shot made them a very dangerous team. And once they became successful with it, then all the analysts and the naysayers who said, well, you can't win by basing your offense around the 3-point shot, they all became very quiet. You don't hear anybody saying it anymore, because this team proved that it could be done. They went and broke the rules and they made it work. Now, this does not necessarily mean that every basketball player should base their game around trying to play like Stephen Curry, because there ain't nobody else out there on the planet who can do what Stephen Curry does. The same way, not everybody could do what Shaquille O'Neal did, but that was a traditional mold, and there was a lot of, every basketball team was based around that at that time. Even growing up, and I don't think I'm that old, growing up playing ball in the 90s, going into the 2000s, into the 2010s, and now into not so much now in the 2020s. It was about the midpoint of the 2010s, around 2014, 2015, when the Warriors started winning championships. This concept went away, but if you were a young, especially males, I don't know so much about women's basketball, but males playing basketball, if you were the tallest guy on the court, or the tallest guy in the gym, tallest guy on the team at any level, this could be youth level, 8 years old, even up to college and the pro level. If you were the tallest guy on the court, the coaches and your fellow players and the observers, everybody would say, okay, well, you're going to be the big guy. All right, you're going to be the center. You got to play around the basket. You got to play with your back to the basket. Your game is going to be based around the post area. But nowadays, we see, now you got players who are 7 feet tall, and they have guard-based games. They're dribbling the ball. They're shooting 3-pointers. They're not posting up at all. They might not even have post skills. And their game is based on playing on the perimeter. They're playing the same way that a guy who was 6 feet would play 30 years ago. Now you got guys who are 6'11" playing that way. And you have players like Kevin Durant. You get a player like a LeBron James. You get these players like Karl Anthony Towns. These players who are really tall, but their game is not completely based on posting up and just being the quote-unquote traditional big man. They're playing this perimeter style because it's been proven that way can work. And all it takes is one person or one group to come around and show, hey, we're going to break this rule and not follow what's traditional and then they're successful with it, then everybody else goes and copies it and says, okay, well, we're going to try that out too. So Stephen Curry and the Golden State Warriors have been the embodiment of that change in basketball. So all you tall young men playing basketball nowadays who nobody gets mad at you when you shoot a three-pointer anymore. Listen, in the 1990s, if somebody was the tallest guy on the court shooting a three-pointer, everybody would get mad. The coach would get mad, the teammates would get mad, the fans in the stands would get mad. Like, hey, you're the big guy. What are you doing shooting threes? Go get in the post where you belong. Go down low. You're a big guy. You're supposed to be around the basket. You're not supposed to do anything else. That has completely changed. The game has completely flipped because someone came around and they were willing to break the rules in some ways. Again, rules are made to maintain order and keep things uniform. But when somebody breaks that order and breaks that uniformity and does it successfully, then everybody else follows. Russell Brunson, another example of this. I just talked about him. I told you he's the person who talked about how you can find your niche in a certain space. Not that you carve out a brand new space, but just find your space within an existing space. He himself, I remember one of the first presentations I ever saw him do. The way that it got my attention was because he had it was like a webinar, like an online presentation where he said, here's the reason why you need to get rid of your website. He said, if you have a website, you're losing money. And the first thing I think to myself was, what? Wait a minute, how does a website lose money? I thought a website was exactly what you needed to make money. You needed an online presence, a home, a place where people could find you online and recognize you and things like that. So the title, first of all, it was a great title because it got my attention. Because I'm a person who had a website. I had multiple websites. So when he said websites are actually costing you money, I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? He don't know what he's talking about. So I started hate watching his presentation. Not really hate watching it, but I watched it because he said something that went against the grain of what I thought. And as I'm watching the presentation, he starts to explain, I started to understand what he meant, because what he ended up explaining was, what you don't need is a website. You don't need a website because a website is just static. It's just information about you. Maybe you have a blog post on there and you got your about page and some nice pictures of you and you tell people where you're from and your little story and all that stuff. That's fine. But then he asked the question, well, what's the purpose of having a website online? I mean, the purpose of being online is you want to make some money, right? You want to make money online. So the best way to make money online, Russell replaced that old idea with the new idea of what you really want is not just a static website, but you want a sales funnel. And what a sales funnel does, it gives somebody something to do when they come to your website. Not just read your story and look at your pictures, but you tell them, hey, get this book or buy this course or put in your email address so you can be part of my list, or you can get this thing or you can get that thing. It basically gives people something to do, so there's an action that they can take. You give people a call to action, and he equated that need with the fact that people have shorter attention spans these days and that we're all on social media. And if you want to get people into your world, you basically have one chance, because somebody will come to your website, and they call this the bounce rate on websites. How often does someone just come to your website, look at one page, and then they leave? They call that bouncing. How often does that happen? Well, it happens all the time. The majority of visitors to every website in the world will bounce. They come to one page, look at it, they do nothing, and they leave. So to combat this, Russell argued in his presentation, was that you need to give people something to do. Give them a call to action so that you can capture their attention and get their information, so that in case they do bounce, you still actually have their information. You got their email address, you got their phone number, you got them to buy something, you got them to take some type of action. So now they're in your world and you can follow up and you can still communicate with them. So what you need is not a website, what you actually need is a sales funnel. And as he explained it, he was very good at explaining it. I said, damn, that makes sense. So then I started, instead of making more websites, started making sales funnels. The guy actually knew what he was talking about. So he said it in a much more emphatic way than what I'm talking about right here, in a way that really got the point across. But the whole point was, what I'm talking about here in point number one, is that rules maintain order, keep everything uniform, keep everybody doing the same. It takes that brave soul or souls or entity who are willing to come along and say, well, let's do something completely different, and they change the whole game for everybody. Point number two. Today's topic, once again, is rule number one, break the rules. Number two, there is a hard cap on how far and how high you can go via following the rules. And there's a risk that comes with breaking the rules. Now, if you follow all the rules, you conform and do everything that you're quote unquote supposed to do, there's a small percentage of people who will succeed through that, because the rules are designed around those people's abilities, or those people's abilities happen to fit perfectly with what the rules are. Problem is, it's not going to work for everybody else. Those people, if they want to succeed, the people who the rules are not designed perfectly to fit perfectly with what you bring to the table, or what you bring to the table do not fit perfectly with the rules, you got to be willing to break the rules. But there's a risk that comes with breaking the rules. Either way, there's a risk. There's a risk that your skill set and your abilities do not fit perfectly with rules, and a risk that when you break the rules, you might end up still not winning. All right, this is just, we call this life, okay? So there's no perfect solution here. I'm just telling you that this is life. There's a shit sandwich that you're gonna have to eat one way or another. And again, there are a few lucky people, at least from the outside looking in, and it looks like they just can just follow the rules, everything's gonna work. They gotta eat a shit sandwich too, you just don't know about it. I talked about the shit sandwich in episode 1663. The only way to remove that hard limit on your possibility in life is by breaking the rules and creating some rules that actually work for you. Now again, breaking the rules does not guarantee that you're gonna be successful, but it does make you eligible for success once you have identified that following the established rules is not going to work. If you know that following the established rules won't work for you, then you need to do something different, such as breaking the rules and doing something other than what you normally do. I mean, that's just simple logic, right? The question is, do you want that eligibility? Do you want that freedom to actually have the possibility of getting to your success, or do you not? Well, understanding, again, the eligibility and freedom that come with the possibility of reaching your highest heights of success, that comes with a risk. All right, everything has a trade-off, folks. Again, episode 1663, what is your favorite flavor of shit sandwich? Just because you are now eligible for success, and even if you reach success, that doesn't mean you're on this yellow brick road and everything's gonna be perfect for the rest of your life. When you break the rules, there are people out there who will fight hard to push back against you, who will fight hard to maintain the status quo, especially if that status quo is what makes them significant. And now here you come disturbing the natural order of things. So you got to be prepared for that backlash. You think of someone like those two people I just mentioned in point number one. When Stephen Curry and the Warriors came along shooting all those 3-pointers and they were looking good and it was fun and people were like, damn, maybe this will work. A bunch of traditionalists who had built their basketball knowledge and expertise around the idea that everything starts on the inside and then you go to the outside, the three-point shot was secondary, they argued against it because it went against everything that they had always knew, everything they had always preached, everything they had been taught. So people argued hard against the Warriors until the Warriors won. So they were facing a ton of backlash until they were champions, until they had succeeded. And then you look at someone like Russell Brunson. He came out and said, well, websites are not what you need. What you actually need is a sales funnel. Well, a lot of people push back against him. Now, it might not have been as, maybe you weren't as cognizant of it if you don't pay attention to that world the same way that you might pay attention to something such as basketball. But that pushback was real, and he had to deal with that blowback until enough success was built up through doing it his way that he was actually proven correct. You look at someone like, I mentioned a couple days ago, and I mentioned before, Donald Trump, when he came into politics, and he said, well, I'm not a politician, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. I'm a businessman. I'm going to come in here and do things this way. Well, did he get pushback? I think everybody knows about that one. This is a good example because everyone knows about it. He got plenty of pushback. Now, whether you agree with him or not, whether you support him or not, voted for him or not, positive or negative feeling about him, we can all agree that he did break the rules and he went against the grain, and there was a ton of pushback that came with him going against the grain. But then when he proved himself correct by getting enough votes to win the presidency, he proved that, okay, you don't have to do things that way and it can actually work out. And that changed, that shifted the paradigm for some people. Didn't shift the paradigm for everybody, but it shifted the paradigm for enough people that he created a whole new set of rules that the game got completely changed, and things are going to be different after that. So be prepared for the possible, when you break the rules, be prepared for the backlash that's going to come, because a lot of people are, being that we're human and creatures of habit, a lot of people are married to the status quo. When you come and challenge that status quo, people aren't going to just lay down and let you do that. They're not going to just say, okay, all right, break the status quo. Go take everything that I believe from the entire 50 years of my life and go against it and just step on it and spit on it and stomp on it, and I'm just going to sit there and let you do it. No, that's not going to happen. They're going to push back. So you got to have some internal fortitude to deal with that pushback that is inevitable when you go against the grain. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is rule number 1, break the rules. Innovators and change agents are rule breakers by definition. All these people that I mentioned, they innovated. You might not consider them innovators, but it's an innovation because they did something different from what was already going on. They were willing to go against the grain, and then they proved themselves correct. These type of people, the change agents, they break rules by definition. Any of you pays attention to the marketing space or digital marketing or technology, you know about Steve Jobs and Apple. They had an ad called 1984, which has been widely recognized as maybe the greatest advertisement in history. You look up the video on YouTube. Just look up Apple 1984, 1984. And that ad was all about Apple basically announcing themselves to the world and letting everybody know, hey, we are going against the grain. We're going to do something different, and here's who our company is for, and here's what our company is about. And the ad was not really about computers. The ad was not really about tech. A little hint there that you should keep in mind when it comes to marketing yourself. It's not really about your product or service. It's really about the feeling and the identity, the branding that you put in the minds of other people, how they feel about it, not about the actual product itself. And Steve Jobs was an innovator. Steve Jobs was a change agent. That ad was letting everybody know that, hey, we are representing change. We are doing something different here. And listen, many people who fail are also rule breakers. I want to make sure I'm giving you both sides of this. Just because you break the rules does not mean you're going to be a success. Doesn't mean everything's going to work out. But breaking the rules might be your only opportunity for success. So the person that you're listening to right now speaking is a man who played 1 year of high school basketball, walked on at a Division III college, and then became a pro. All right, I broke a rule. The rules traditionally say if you could barely make your high school team, you're probably not going to play in college. The rules traditionally say if you're playing Division III college, then you're probably not going to become a pro. So there were rules that needed to be broken in order for me to do that. The rules say I shouldn't even have bothered trying. But an innovation is exactly that, folks. It's someone willing to try something that most people would say wouldn't even make sense to try. Then they break the rules and they actually make it work. And now we got a whole new paradigm. Now there's a whole shift in the way that people look at things because that person proved that this can actually work. So remembering, again, I said this for the third time today, this comes with a risk. Breaking the rules is risky. Had I not made it in basketball, let's say, then you might not even listen to this show right now. I might have to come with a completely different angle because I can't use that. Many of the angles that I come from here on this show are based on the credibility of what I achieved despite the odds that I went against. But had I not done that, then I might have to do something different. I might have some of the same thoughts, but I couldn't talk about it the same way because I don't have the same cachet to go with it. So understanding that when you break rules, there's going to be a pushback, there are going to be challenges, and it does not guarantee that you're going to succeed. But once you put yourself in a position of breaking the rules, all right, now the bridge is burned. All right, you can't go back. So now you got two choices, sink or swim. Let's recap today's class, which is rule number 1, break the rules. Point number 1, rules are made to maintain order, keep everything uniform and predictable, which is a good idea because human beings, we are all creatures of habit. But in order to get things to work in your way, unless you happen to be one of the few for whom the rules work perfectly, you got to be unconventional and unpredictable, at least in some ways. Breaking a rule can be as simple as just challenging a long-held belief in your space. Look at the Golden State Warriors and Stephen Curry with all the three-pointers. Russell Brunson said, no more websites, instead use a sales funnel. Donald Trump said, instead of being a politician, don't be a politician to get into politics. Point number 2, there's a hard cap on how far and how high you can go by following the rules for most people. And there's also a risk that comes with breaking the rules. Again, breaking the rules does not guarantee success, but it does make you eligible for success. Rule breakers are disturbing the status quo, and people will not just lay down and let you disturb the status quo that they've been living with for the last 25 years. They will fight hard against you. Be ready for that before you show up. And if you don't have the balls to deal with that, then this is probably not the thing that you want to be doing. I talked about having balls in episode 1796. And point number 3, innovators and change agents are rule breakers by definition. Many failures are also rule breakers, again, by definition. You'll listen to a person who broke some rules in order to get to where I got to in the sports world. And remember that innovations are exactly that. A breaking of the rules and a new way gets introduced. But also keeping in mind, I'm going to keep telling you this idea of breaking rules and the action of breaking rules is going to cause pushback. You're going to face challenge and people are going to fight back against you. So make sure you keep gathering up and stacking up proof that your way of breaking the rules actually works, because people are going to demand it when they see that you're doing something different, because they may be curious, but you got to be able to prove it to them. So all this said, if you're a person who is looking for someone who can help hold you accountable so that you can get to where you want to go, whether that means breaking the rules, following them, or making your own rules when it comes to your personal, professional development, you may be a perfect candidate for my 3rd-day mastermind. That is the only place that I offer direct one-on-one coaching. In order to get in, you must hop on a Zoom call with me first. I vet every person that comes through. The way you get that Zoom call is to go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. The link is down below. You click the button that says join the mastermind. You'll fill out a quick form, get on a Zoom call with me, and we'll talk about where you're at, where you want to go, what your challenges are, what your needs are, where you want to be a year from now, where you want to be 5 years from now, and then I'll let you know. Can I help you? Can I not help you? And how it will work. So go to workonyourgameuniversity.com if you're interested in that coaching. And send me a text at 305-384-6894. That's for anyone who wants to get my daily motivation text every single day, send it straight to your phone. Work on your game. Dre all day.